Hello everybody and welcome to Class 8 of Premiere Pro for the Filmmaker. This class we're going to talk a little bit about color correction and the final grade and how to kind of establish a look for your project. And this is one of the most important parts once you're almost done with your edit, to give it establish a look and make sure all of the exposures and everything match across the board. So we're going to talk about a couple different color correcting tools built into Premiere. But for the main part, we're going to be focusing on Colorista 2 throughout this course. It's exactly what I use and what a lot of my professional friends use to do color grades. Now, keep in mind, if you're a startup editor and whatnot, the default tools in Premiere will suffice. But as you grow, you're going to have more complicated grades or more things you're going to be able to tweak and just speeding up your workflow in general. And so Colorista 2 really helps with that. And then once you get to a certain level, like a lot of the edits we do at our production company, a lot of those edits go to a professional colorist, and it's graded, on higher end systems. And FX PhD offers a lot of courses for that. So this is kind of be an introductory course or class more on simple color correcting final product. So some of the default tools we have built into Premiere are things like the three-way color corrector. And if we just pick out a shot here, I can show you real quickly how we would grade something like this with a three-way color corrector. I don't use this tool very often, once again, because I mostly deal with Colorista 2. But, most color correction apps are similar in the fact that they have, your shadows, your midtones, and your highlight color correction wheels. And so you can affect the different tonal ranges on each one of these sections. Here I'm affecting my midtones and what color range I want, and I can slide this around to change the hue. Some other things that are built into these color correction tools, let me just reset this, is your basic contrast and your auto white levels and things like that, which actually Premiere is kind of nice to be able just to quickly affect your black levels and white levels and things like that. Some other things that I actually use with these, sometimes if I just want to do a quick color correction, is the fast color corrector. I don't use this very often, but sometimes it's nice if I just want to put a certain overall look onto my image. And once again, it works the same, but this doesn't allow you to change the highlights, midtones, and saturation, or highlights, midtones, and shadows. It just allows you to affect the overall master control of your image. But once again, you can come in here and kind of get a quick look of your image by affecting your input black and white levels and just changing around your kind of midtones and things like that. So these are two kind of quick and easy ways to color correct inside Premiere, and you can go into more detail with these, but I really don't want to waste time with what's built in here. I really want to talk about what I would use on a typical basis for a real job. And so, Colorista 2, it's $2.99 right now, and it's not extremely expensive when you talk about what you can get out of this program. And Stu Masterwitz has done lots of courses on FX PhD, and he has kind of built this program from the ground up for color correctors and people that need to really add certain looks to their programs. You also have things like Magic Bullet Looks, which you can build into Premiere 2. And just so you see how this would work, if you did purchase Magic Bullet Looks, you would drag and drop here, click Edit Look, and it'll actually open up in a separate program where you can start to define certain looks. And so these are nice just to kind of get an idea of where you want to go, and you can tweak all of these settings down here and really start to define some really cool templates. But Magic Bullet Looks is pretty expensive, and it's really overkill for a lot of the things that you can now do in Colorista or Colorista 2. And so to start out here, I really, to get a feel for what I want to do with this color correction, I don't want to change a lot. I've been playing around with this color correction a little bit, and I like the fact that I shot this very flat in the 5D. And I've talked a lot to a good friend of mine, Khalid Matasib, who works at the production company with me, about color correction, how he defines things shooting with the 5D or Sony F3 or different things, and there's a certain aesthetic you get just from shooting in the camera, where even if you shoot really flat picture profile settings and things like that, yes, you can come in and change most of what you want, but if you really define the look in the camera, there's just a certain way it handles the highlights, and it handles your exposure, and just the way everything kind of looks straight out of the camera. So a lot of times he'll actually set up his camera picture profiles to exactly what he wants, and then make some minor tweaks in post. And that's kind of where I'm feeling right now with this. I like the flat kind of feel of being a behind the scenes, but also just kind of the desaturated model look of this. And this was shot with the very flat picture profile settings on the 5D Mark II. And so if I really want to get into this, I'll drag my Colorista 2 onto the beginning, and this will be like our kind of defining our establishing look. And you kind of want to start with an establishing shot, like a shot that's farther out, so you can kind of get an idea of how it's going to look as you pop in. It's the same way you would normally light a scene. You would normally light for the wide shot, and then you can make tweaks as you punch in the close shot. And that's one nice thing Colorista has going for it, is because it has not only your three-way color corrector built in, but it has your primary, secondary, and master settings. So what I normally will do is come under here and maybe give a quick auto white balance of just kind of giving an overall look to make sure I'm properly on the right white balance. And then I'll do that under my primary, and then I'll come under my master, and this is where I'll actually start to define my my overall look that I want to establish across the board on all of my shots. Because once I establish an overall look, I can always come back and copy and paste this down the line, and then just change my three-way color corrector on my primary here. And so, for instance, one of the first things you can do is come under your RGB curves and kind of adjust on these sliders here, your shadows and your contrast and your mids and your highs. And so if you just want to pop those down, once again, I want to keep this kind of flat, and maybe bring up a little bit of the mids, and I like a little bit of highlights on this just to, because it's kind of a model feel to it, so I can bring my highlights up a little bit. And any time on Colorista 2 you can come and turn on the master bypass to turn on and off those settings. So coming under now my three-way here, some things that I like to do is, and these are really great tricks that Stu Mashwitz has taught me, is coming under your midtones and cooling off your midtones and warming up your highlights a little bit. You don't need to do it much, but just to establish that look. And so it doesn't seem like a whole lot of difference, but if I just turn this on and off, you can see I kind of corrected that warmish tone to more of a coolish tone, properly exposed. And that looks like a better image already. So what I would typically do at this point is go ahead and collapse all these down so there's not a lot of things around, and just come into my primary three-way, because I'm going to get this prepped for the rest of my clips down the line. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to Control or Apple C and copy the Colorista 2 effect, and then I'm going to come down to the next one and I'm going to paste it. And now you see my primaries are already up. Everything's ready for me to start to make minor tweaks. And then first, you don't really need to do a lot as you tweak down the line. I'm just going to, once again, make sure my highlights and midtones are kind of prepped out. And you can hit the S and the A key to go back and forth between your cuts. So looking okay, I'm going to go to the next one now, and once again I'm going to paste this in and make some minor tweaks, just bringing up those colors to where they belong. And this is very simple. I'm just going to keep going down the line so you can kind of have an idea of what I'll be doing with each clip. Let me make sure I didn't copy that twice. Yeah, I did. Oops. Let me take that off. And this clip here, it's a little bit too blue in the highlights, so I'm going to bring that back to give it more of a natural look. And once again, all I'm doing is tweaking these little sliders here as I go, so everybody knows your highlights, your midtones, and your shadows, and then here on the left, these settings here are your saturation to bring it up or down for that highlight, and then these are your lightness and darkness settings to bring those up and down. So I really just want to compare back and forth as I move down the line. I'm going to paste these in to the next shot. So again, just kind of give a nice little bit of a blown out feel. Like I said, I don't want to affect a whole lot on these clips because I really like the natural color. And you want to see I'm losing some color in her face when I'm doing that, and I want to make sure I bring that back in. So you just have to be careful now as I pop back in, and I'm actually going to turn this on and off for this look. I'm just bringing back up her face a little bit. The color correction is interesting because you don't need to do a lot. You don't need to do a whole lot of tweaking around to make it look like extremely different. So less is more when you do color correction. I strongly believe in that. So I'm going to bring on this shot my highlights down a little bit. And this is just a rough grade. I just want to kind of get an overall feel as I come through clip by clip and match my settings here. And so you see it's very subtle, just kind of giving a little bit more feel to the texture of the skin, making sure the exposure is properly brought in. And you'll see how this plays as I get to some more shots. I'm not going to actually affect this shot at all, this time lapse. I've already kind of color corrected it, and I kind of like the look of how it is right now. I'm going to come to the next one here. And so this is a good example of when since I shot this all on very flat but also not much sharpness at all, on when I would want to add a little bit more sharpness. So there's a couple ways I can do that to this clip, just because it's a little bit soft. I can either add a sharpen to the whole clip and bring this amount up until it starts to bring that. Now you can see that's way overkill. I don't usually go above 50. And that's just a little bit, it's hard to see, but it's just a little bit of sharpening you can add. What I like to use more of the sharpening, since I do have the power of Colorista to use on this grade, is a thing called pop. And this is kind of like the clarity feature in Lightroom. And so actually let me come back to this clip and you can kind of see better what pop does to the whole overall look of the image. Once again, it's under secondary, and I can just bring this up, and as you see, her hair texture becomes, and I can bring it down too, and it becomes nice and soft. And so this is something that I'll use on some of the clips that look a little bit soft to bring them back in, but I don't want to add too much texture. I kind of like just this very soft feel of these images and the exposure and the flatness, but some of them need to add a little bit extra to them. And so this would be a case that I would bring the midtones up a little bit. Moving on to the next clip. And you can see this is a pretty quick process. I'm not really affecting a whole lot per clip on these, but just giving it a little bit more of a pop to the contrast and to the exposure, and keeping a pretty equal look. And I'm just going to quickly keep going through these. Pretty happy with most of these shots right now with the exposure. And this is why it's important, when you're shooting stuff, because not always will you be shooting your own work. You'll be editing for other people, but if you can, always getting that look in camera is the best. You can see what that slight mid-tone pop does to this image right there. It's really nice. So the more you can get in camera, obviously, the better. We're moving on here. Some of these might be, I want to cool off a little bit more. Now here's a good example of where I want to really tweak the shots. Very dark in the shadows. So once again, I'm not affecting my other color corrections or even this clip in the masters. I'm just coming under my primaries and just tweaking these shadows up a little bit. And same thing with my midtones, bringing my highlights up. Until I like it, and that's much, much better. I can turn that on and off. You can see I'm just bringing back in some of that flatness into the image, which looks nice for this. Let's see what I can do here. Just kind of give it that white background, blowing it out a little, a little bit more, not making it so orange in the background, but it's hard because of our skin tones. I'm going to show you in a little bit on this interview how I can really affect that. So that's kind of nice. It's flatter. I want to bring a little bit more in the shadows here to kind of make it pop out. There we go. And you can see I can go back and forth to match these shots. Once again, this is my first pass. I'll normally go through the color grade, 2 to 3 times until I feel it's right. This one feels a little bit yellow. So let me just bring the highlights down there a little bit. This down. That looks a little bit better already. Another thing I can always do is change my primary saturation. If I wanted to make it a little bit less, I can bring it down a bit. But like I said, most of these colors are pretty natural. I want to add a little bit of pop to this one because it's a little bit out of focus as is. So I'll just bring that up to around 40. And there we go, a little bit orange. Bring it down a little bit more. Match. Okay, these are getting... Now that one's very dark, once again, so I'm going to bring up my, not too high, but I want to bring up my shadows a little bit. When you're looking at your grade, you want to look at the sections you're actually color correcting. So if I'm looking at my shadows, I'm looking at these darker spots, this sleeve, this background here. And when I look at the midtones, I'm looking more at her skin tones around. I want to try and match those skin tones and make it a little bit more orange and then just kind of pop up those highlights a little bit. So once again, before and after, just kind of evening everything out. Paste it down here again. And this one needs a little bit of work. I think I might, let me see if I bring the saturation up just a bit on this one. Yeah, that's what it needed. Once again, just minor tweaks on each clip. Bring my shadows up a tiny bit here. My midtones up a little bit. Get a little bit more blue, not very, kind of like this background, but I don't want to, there we go, right in there. And we're almost done here with the main color correction. Alright, and the last one here looks alright. So, what I want to do is I'm actually going to render this just by hitting the enter key or the return key and making sure my work area bar is set to the beginning and the end. And we'll take a quick break. When this comes back, we'll quickly go through and make sure our main color grade looks alright. Okay, so now that we're all rendered out here on this clip, I can quickly scrub through and just make sure that everything kind of has a feel that matches the shots prior, and see if anything just really stands out, that it just doesn't feel right in the edit. Just come back and forth. This clip's a little bit out of place. Let me see what I can do with this time lapse, just to try and bring a little bit more warmth to it. See what that looks like. Bring my midtones down a bit, highlights down a little bit. I think that feels better. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Let's render that section out real quick. We'll keep going through. This is why it's important to render first, so you can get that feel. I think this one's a little bit too flat. Just bring my shadows down a little bit more here. we go. Render that one. So it's just minor tweaks at this point, just to make sure everything's in line. And this one, something's just not perfect on it. Try the midtones up a little bit and the shadows down. Put a little more contrast in there. This is a hard shot to grade. It looks better. Alright, and I'm going to render that section out. And then our two obvious flaws are the interviews at the beginning and end. And this is just completely out of place. We need to fix this up and try to bring a little bit more of the background a little bit to white, but keeping his facial textures the same. And in order to do that, I'm actually going to bring this in After Effects and do it in Colorista 2 in After Effects, which I could do it in Premiere, but I just want to show you the workflow because some people really like to grade in After Effects, and there's nothing wrong with that. So a couple different ways you could do it. You could actually just, have this clip and export this clip by itself as a ProRes or as an animation, or you can right click, select replace with After Effects composition, and once again make sure that you're under your hard drive, James Model Shoot, Projects, and I have a folder for After Effects where I'm going to have color correction interview 1. And this will be the first one, and I'm going to hit save. And it's actually going to load up After Effects and load up my comp. And so you can see there's some black at the beginning, and then it brings up the clip because it's actually bringing the cross dissolve. And one thing here, which is pretty cool, is I'm linked now with After Effects. So if I make, a color correction change by coming under my effects and presets and coming under Colorista 2, and let's just say I completely darken out my midtones here. If I save this and come back to Premiere, it's dark, so it's pretty cool little workflow, especially for grading or a couple shots or doing minor things. I'm going to be honest, Dynamic Link is an incredible tool in the Adobe Suite, but it's not perfect by any means. There's a lot of flaws with it, so I tend to stick with one clip at a time if I'm actually doing this round trip process between Dynamic Link and After Effects. I don't really like doing multiple clips, otherwise I'll just render them out. I've had big issues in the past with doing lots of edits and just not having the results that you would expect. Now that's not saying it's all the time. I've actually had lots of cuts and been successful, but just overall be careful about your use of Dynamic Link because sometimes it can be a mess if you do a lot of edits and do a lot of fine-tuning in After Effects and then come back and realize that something's broke and then you have to start from scratch. So I'm just going to reset this, and I'm going to do something very similar where I'll start out here under my primary and get my auto balance here, and you can see that's already a lot better. But I want to go a little bit further here, and I'm going to actually change my highlights a little bit here, my midtones, give it a little S curve, just a very slight one. After Effects is nice because it has this little graph here that you can see. You can't actually affect things on the graph, but it gives you a nice little visual reference. And then I'm going to come under my master three-way here, and I'm going to cool off my mids, warm up my highlights a little bit. But really why I came into After Effects in the first place is to see what I can do with this background. 1 second, let me get that fixed. There's another cool little trick down here in Colorista 2 for show skin overlay, and you can kind of bring in your skin and see where your skin tones are. And I have some work to get my skin tones right into that color. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I'm starting to get some more of the skin tones where they belong. There we go. It's just a nice little handy reference. Oops. Let's come back under here, fit up to 100%. And I'll turn that off for now. So we're getting a good look around here, but this background is very distracting. So let's see what I can do to minimize that. And the cool thing about Colorista 2 is you have your secondary keyer here. And I can actually come under and edit this. What I want to do is just drag a box kind of around this section here. And this is basically making a matte that I'm going to be able to grade. And so once I do that, I can actually come under the plus and I can start to plus out this white area by just dragging around in there. And I can slowly bring out some of these back in here. And it's just finding that balance between both of them. I'm actually going to start one more time here. That, and I'm going to plus out this back side. It's okay if a little bit of his mouth comes in. What I want to do is actually try and choke this out a little bit. I can choke these colors. I can also add a softness to the mask. That softness will kind of just give me some nice edges there. And you'll see now, if I come under and start to bring up my highlights now, I'm not affecting his face anymore, I'm just affecting the color range here of the background. And I can bring my highlights and my midtones more to a bluish whitish color until they're balanced out. And very quickly I've made a big difference on this image, just making it look more of a standard interview on a white backdrop. You don't want to push it too far and make it look too fake, but it's definitely pretty cool. So I'm saving this out. I'm going to come back over to Premiere. I should hopefully see this conform and change, and that looks pretty nice. As it comes in.
We're here in my downtown studio, photographing.
And I want to do the same thing to this side. It would be the same procedure. But I'm going to show you real quick instead, if I actually just want to copy this out and replace it, is to come under, and let me just duplicate this sequence. I'll just say second clip. This is how I would typically export a ProRes version. Basically, I just open up a brand new sequence. I'm going to delete everything except this one clip here, bring it to the beginning, and this is what I want to send to After Effects. Once again, I have my keyboard shortcuts up to set an in point and out point. I'm going to come under File, Export Media, and under here I just want to set up a QuickTime, and I have presets here for ProRes 422, and I'll show you this in the next class, Class 9, how to do all of these settings. The other thing you can do is come under QuickTime and you can actually set up a custom animation, but if you had Final Cut and you have ProRes installed, this is a great way to do it really quickly. So, oops, let me cancel that. I want to make sure that I'm going to the right place, so I'm actually going to go under my model shoot, After Effects. I'm going to put it into this folder here. I'll call this Class 08 second clip. Save, export. And now I'm just going to export that clip out. I'm going to come into After Effects, go to my project here, come under and import that clip. Oops. And all I need to do now is, kind of like we did in the time-lapse class, drag this down to a new comp. And since I have this other clip right here from the one we just affected, I can go ahead and copy my Colorista 2 from this one to this one, and I'm pretty much done and ready to go. And now all I have to do is composition, make movie, go and set my render queue. It's a preset from my ProRes 422, and then come back under my drive and projects, Premiere, actually After Effects. I'll say rendered, save that out, render that out real quick. And this seems like it might take a long time to do, but I'm just showing you how fast it is to be able to just take a clip from Premiere and go to After Effects and back to Premiere instead of trying to use Dynamic Link. And like I said, I have nothing against Dynamic Link, but I've run into lots of problems where it's just sometimes it's just easier for me to do it this way. So once this is done rendering here, which we're almost done. Alright, I'll come back to Premiere. Go ahead and import the rendered clip. Remember, once again, I'm working off my hard drive at all times. And then all I have to do is hold down my Alt key and drag over, and it just replaced it for me in a timeline. Two more things I wanted to talk to you about briefly here is if you really want to, you can actually select everything on this timeline, come under Clip, and then select Nest. And that will basically take all yet to the entire project. You can come back under your Colorista 2 again. And one cool thing is under your secondary, you actually have not only the keyer, which we just showed in After Effects, but you also have Power Mask. And so I can set in a Ellipse Power Mask. And to see that Power Mask, you actually have to select here onto the effect. And I can actually just drag this around and move it. And what I want to actually do there, oops, I don't want to apply it, but I want to show a invert. So I invert just the outside, and then I'll actually come under my secondary three-way here. And I'm just going to bring down my shadows. I can even give it a little bit of a blue color to the outside there. And so basically I'm just adding an overall vignette to my entire piece using Colorista 2, which is another use for the program. Kind of does a little bit of everything in one. The last thing I want to show you is sometimes in a grade, in a final grade, you want to add, say if you're shooting 1080p, you want to add a 235 letterbox to the whole project. And one way you can do that is eHartfordStudios.com has a really cool HD letterbox template pack for both 720p and 1080p. You can download these packs, which has all these different versions of letterboxing. And once you do that, you can just drag this letterbox onto a new video layer, and instantly it's just a PNG file. And you can add a 235 look to your entire piece, which is another option that you might want to do. That pretty much wraps up our class. For the last class, we're going to take this entire grade, and we're going to export it out, and I'm going to go through the export settings. So if you have any questions, please comment in the forums, and I look forward to talking to everyone in the future.